Hello and welcome to Can You Believe It? Part 19 of Making Sense of the Crisis. Who would have thought all of those weeks ago as we entered into lockdown that we would be still here, still trying to make sense of this crisis? Where are we all at? How are you all doing? We would like to know that on the comment bar underneath if you're watching on YouTube. Please subscribe, and please don't forget to share this live feed. It really does help increase the views. So lots of people are back to work, and if you are back to work, how is that going for you? Tonight we're going to have a look at the risks and the hazards in the workplace, what they are, what workers are experiencing at the moment, how workers in different sectors are able to get back to work and back to work safely or not, as some of the panel might think. As we know, and actually Claudia Webbe MP has just updated me that in Leicester there's a local lockdown which was due to be reviewed, but it has been announced today by Matt Hancock that that will be extended for at least another 2 weeks because the rate of infection is down, but it's not down enough. And really we'll be thinking about and trying to explore, is there a relationship? I think I kind of know the answer to this, but I want to hear what the panel think as well. Is there a relationship between the protection that you have from the virus and your employment relationships, the levels of exploitation that you might receive? We have three excellent panelists tonight. As always, we've got Melissa Evans, McDonald's worker and Bakers Union activist, Steve Turner, who is Assistant General Secretary of Unite the Union and co-chair of the People's Assembly, and as I've already mentioned, the wonderful Claudia Webbe MP of Leicester East. We are going to make a couple of announcements just before we hear from Melissa first, and the first one is tomorrow kicks off Toll Puddle Festival, so please don't forget that that will be streaming live. A really important festival, of course, all online this year because of the crisis that in the trade union movement. Very important. And another date for your diary, Saturday the 25th of July at 1 o'clock, we have a really important event, the future of industry, jobs and rights at work. So you can have a little look. That will be put in the comment bar now. And last but not least, before I do be quiet and we hear from Melissa, please, if you can, if you've got any spare money at all, I know things are incredibly difficult for people right now, but if you do have any spare money, please support the People's Assembly by texting donate, and I'm going to read out the number right now, to 07594 135 666, and I'll read that out again in a moment. I have some other announcements to make, but I'm not going to wait any longer to hear Melissa's take on the state of work. She is, as I said, a McDonald's worker and a Bakers Union activist. Melissa, it's really great to have you back. You had a fair few very positive comments after your last contribution on our show. It's over to you to tell us about how you are making sense of health, safety, rights at work right now as the lockdown is being lifted. Thanks, Melissa.
Hi everyone, I'm Melissa. I'm a mum to a wonderful son. I work at McDonald's in South London. I've worked there for 3 years and I really enjoy my job. I really enjoy being with my colleagues, but the work is really stressful and really hard. And we work really hard, but we don't get any respect and there's no appreciation. And for all the hard work we do, we don't get no respect, and that we don't get the respect we deserve. The pay that we get is not enough to live on. It keeps me in poverty, and I'm a mum, and poverty is inherited. I remember one time when I literally had no money and not a penny to my name, and I had no gas, no electric, and we sat in the dark and we sat in the cold. Do you know how that makes you feel? Like, it makes you feel like a bad mum, and it makes you feel like you're failing your son. Is that right when I work for one of the richest companies on earth? I can only get what I need when I want something extra, like my AirPods, or even if I wanted to educate myself, I have to go broke to pay for it. Is that fair? Is it right? It's not. You know, is it right that McDonald's pays their CEO £5,000 an hour? Is it right? You know, is it fair that McDonald's pays me and my workmates as little as they can get away with? Is it right that when accused of breaking McDonald's own rules on sexual conduct, that the CEO walks away with $42 million? Whilst me and my son are cold and sat in the dark. I'm not ashamed. This is not my fault. It's the system's fault. The system is broken. We need to talk about this. It's happening everywhere. But I'm not beaten. I'm fighting back. I'm showing my son that there's much more to this world than low pay and jobs where you get no respect. I'm showing him that if you want respect, you've got to demand it. That's what makes a good mum. That's why I joined the union, and that's why I'm fighting for 15 and a union, because I want justice. And if we want justice, we have to fight for it. And the best way of fighting for justice is coming together with my co-workers to form a union and demand it. We have strength in numbers, and we only have power together. We can only get justice when we stand together. That's how we win. That's how we win £15 an hour. That's how we win a union. And that's how we make our lives better for ourselves and our families. I've been moved by Black Lives Matter. We won't be silent on the matter of racial justice anymore. We will not be quiet. We need to keep talking about this, keep moving forward, keep making gains. I guess you can see that I'm a product of interracial relations, which is probably not so long ago would have raised more than a few eyebrows. Both my parents would technically be classed as mixed race. I don't know much about my ancestors, but I do know that one of my ancestors owned up to 47 slaves. A slave owner from a plantation called Red Bank in Jamaica. He was called Abe Evans, a white British slave owner who fathered children with a girl from the Congo. She was 13. Sadly, I don't know her name. She mothered children that were born free. And sadly, she died. Abe remarried, and his new wife, Anne McConnell, sold the children as slaves when he died. 200 years later, here I am, Melissa Evans. I was made out of a system of slavery and of exploitation. That's my father's side. My mother has Romani Gypsy and Caribbean and African heritage, but we don't know too much about that. So I guess I will never know. Lots of mixed race people I know don't know their heritage. Black Lives Matter is so important to me. Black people came to this country for so many reasons. They came because of Britain's colonial history, the violent takeovers and exploitations of people all over the world. They came to make a better life, to escape poverty and oppression. They came to nurse, they came to contribute, they came to make, and they came to build. And we did. We built the economy, we nursed the sick, we formed unions, and we fought for better. We often had to fight for our own unions to win their support, and we often still do. We fought in wars, in every war that this country has had. Black and Asian soldiers have fought in, right or wrong. But the empire didn't bring us here to integrate. It brought us here to serve. It brought us here to make money for the rich white man and to keep them rich. Yeah, we can vote. Yeah, we don't get whipped anymore, but our chains are not broken. Our chains are poverty. Our chains are exclusion. Our chains are the conscious and unconscious racism we face in our daily lives. The system is broken and it needs to change. We deserve equal treatment. We deserve not to be the people most likely to catch COVID and die. We deserve not to be the people doing all the low-wage jobs. We deserve we deserve the life and a life of dignity and respect. I'm proud to be a member of the Bakers Union. I'm proud to be representing my co-workers from the Max Strike BAME Committee. I'm proud to be part of an international movement of fast food workers of all races and genders and sexualities. I feel honoured to have organised my co-workers and taken strike action for 15 and a union. That means dignity and respect for me and my son. I feel huge pride that in 2019, I went on strike for the first time. I felt strong. I felt like I was making a difference. I felt like the unity that has inspired me, that kind of unity inspired me to be part of this movement for the rest of my life. They, together with my co-workers, they had my back and I had theirs. Together, you know, for one simple demand, 15 in a union. I feel privileged to have have been asked to make a really exciting announcement today. On the 20th of July, our co-workers in the USA are making history. Workers in McDonald's, care workers and airport workers are gonna strike for Black lives. They're gonna strike for racial and economic justice. Black, brown, Latino and white workers together for racial and economic justice. This is our chance. This is what we have struggled for hundreds of years. A movement of workers with power, challenging the system. And as a committee of BAME workers, we wanted to take part, so we decided to host a Zoom call on the 19th of July at 7 p.m, the evening before the strikes. We want to tell our sisters and brothers in the USA that we are with them, that their struggle is our struggle. The strike for Black lives means it's our turn. The torch of freedom is being passed to us. I'll post it in the chat. Please join us. We have an actual American worker called Betty who's going to be on strike. I'll be speaking, and my co-worker Rebecca too. We will have guest speakers from the movement, including Selma James and other BAME activists. Please join us. It will be so inspiring. And finally, I just want to say this. Now is the time. This is our time. The responsibility falls on us. Pandemics, environmental catastrophe, and economic collapse. We can and we will build a new world based on equality, freedom, and human dignity. Black Lives Matter, strike for Black lives. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Melissa. I just want to Zoom with you each morning and like get cheated up for the fight for the day. Honestly, thank you so much. And like the work that the Bakers Union are doing, by the way, and the rally on Sunday should definitely be supported by the whole movement. That you are having that kind of transatlantic connection with Black sisters and brothers in the United States, fighting for their terms and conditions, I presume alongside white brothers and sisters in the workplace who are restoring their labour too, as a solid unit and power against that exploitation. Absolutely brilliant, and solidarity to you for Sunday as well. I think it is gonna be popped in the comments. So please, so please, people watching, make sure that you find that Bakers Union event that's in there, that you share it, you like it, share again, and just give them all the solidarity that you can. Thanks so much, Melissa. We're going to go now to thanks to Steve Turner, who, as I said, is the Assistant General Secretary of Unite the Union and co-chair of the People's Assembly. And Steve, I imagine you have seen firsthand the experiences of workers throughout this crisis and the journey that they have come on. And I would really like you now to just take some time to set that out, and also for us to think about the future. Before you speak, share this link. Off you go, Steve.
Great, thanks very much for that, Laura. And what a powerful presentation earlier from Melissa. Congratulations, everything that you're doing for the fight for 15 in a union. I know you're linking up with our hospitality people as well in Unite, and it's a fantastic campaign. So anything that anybody can do to support that anywhere, actually, it's a global movement. Let's make sure that we do, and we do fight for that justice and dignity and status in society, not just in the workplace. Fantastic. Well done, Melissa. And can I thank the People's Assembly? It's a bit strange for me to be sitting here as a guest when I normally co-chair the People's Assembly. But what a great job Laura's done over the last 19 episodes of the Thursday Zoom meeting. I mean, it's keeping the crisis not just in our minds, but keeping that battle of ideas firmly in front of us, so that we can have the debate, even if it's online, and we can't do it in a physical meeting, and we can't get on the streets physically in the way in which we would normally do this. Certainly that battle of ideas is being fought out and won online by the hundreds and hundreds of people that take part and the thousands that share it. So fantastic, and a great initiative it is. Tonight's debate, really topical, of course. I've been leading for Unite in discussions with the government on a number of fronts, from the job retention scheme that's put 14 million people under the state's pay protection right now, although it's being phased out, of course, into discussions on safe return to work. And of course, it's true to say that millions of workers have worked all the way through this, and many have lost their lives in doing so, whether they're health and social care workers that have lost their lives fighting to save our lives, quite disgracefully, due to the failures of government to protect them on frontline services, whether it's bus drivers, and we've lost too many bus drivers as well during this crisis, whether it's refuse collectors or local authority workers, retail workers, warehouse workers. You know, millions of people have worked through, but of course, millions of others have not been able to do that, either for public health reasons or for reasons of disruption to supplies or demand for their product or services, and therefore they've been furloughed. And you know, right now, I know Claudia's going to touch on this, of course, she's MP for Leicester East, but we've got the lockdown in Leicester. Laura spoke about that before, just been extended for another 2 weeks. We've got the potential for another lockdown in Blackburn, and we don't know where that's going to head over the course of the coming days. We've had walkouts in Ireland from organised workplaces where they've not been provided with personal protective equipment in areas of work in food manufacturing, where they can't necessarily socially distance in the way that you can elsewhere. And employers have tried to exploit the situation of employing thousands upon thousands of migrant labourers and believing that they don't understand their rights or they won't join unions. Well, in reality, they have joined unions and they have walked out and they have won. That's the reality of it. And that's the power of, as Melissa said earlier, the power of joining a union, thinking that you're not on your own, you're part of something. And of course, together, collectively, in a united way, we can make a difference. And now we're seeing thousands of workplaces reopen, of course, and growing concerns about how those workplaces are reopening and whether or not we're going to get a second spike or indeed concentrations of COVID outbreaks in those workplaces themselves. And we've seen some quite horrific examples of that. And I'll just go into a few of those if I can. Public Health England just last week recorded 43 cases of workplace outbreaks, quite significant outbreaks. And that's a 50% increase on the recorded number of workplace outbreaks the week previously. So we're seeing an escalation now of direct correlation between people going back to work, not going back into safe workplaces where the work's been done, where perhaps the union's not organised, where we haven't got fantastic shop stewards and health and safety reps working with employers to put those safe systems of work in place, to make sure we've got staggered breaks and proper shielding for workers at work to ensure there's no contamination or spread in shared areas like canteens and car parks and walkways and the rest of it. We've done fantastic work where we're organised, of course. I take my hat off to our stewards, our safety reps, our officers who have worked tirelessly to protect members all the way through this and work and continue to do that. But of course, this is a class issue. This is absolutely a BAME issue, as Claudia quite rightly will talk about, and I'm sure Melissa spoke about earlier. It is about concentrations of low-paid workers, of exploited workers, of those working on precarious contracts via agencies on 0 hours contracts, those that haven't got union organisation, migrant labour that's fearful about its status in the UK, maybe even, that's exploited in housing and in shared accommodation, often owned by the employer or agents of the employer. And if you cause trouble and lose your job, you lose your home. And I've personally experienced that, where I've met workers that have been threatened. You know, if they don't toe the line, not only will they lose their job, they'll lose their home, and they're there with their kids, and their kids will be thrown out on the streets, and they'll lose their schooling, and they don't know what will happen to them, and they have no money. And often the gang master owns their passport and keeps their passport, and therefore has got that ultimate chain around. They can't move anywhere. They're completely locked in to a gang master who they have to pay for the privilege of working for. And that still exists now, still exists right now in modern day Britain. And that's why we got the Modern Slavery Act. And that's really, really important that we organise to deal with these issues in a very constructive way, in a collective way, and understanding the class issues that come from this as well. You know, poor union organisations, high concentrations of migrant labour, shared housing, this whole question about threats with dismissals. We've seen it in textiles, in Leicester, a whole host of workplaces there, producing goods for high street chains. High street, they couldn't give a shit whether what the working conditions are for somebody working in Leicester, as long as they can get a £5 dress. And shamefully, people feel that it's appropriate to go and buy it for £7 perhaps. in a shop on a high street. You know, we've got to deal with these questions that come from that and call to account the retailers that are quite happy to allow that exploitation to go on. Let's damage the real causes of this, as well as the employers and the exploiters. Let's follow the chain and make sure that those that actually post the contract, that sign the deal, you know, that want to take money out of the contract in order to get a cheaper product, but they couldn't give two hoots about the implications for that on ordinary working people that have to produce that in some sweatshop somewhere, whether that's in Leicester or the East End of London or Glasgow. Doesn't really matter where it is, of course, could be overseas, and they don't care. So we need to care, and we need to do something about that. Whether it's in agricultural workers, and we've seen, again, migrant labour from Eastern Europe living in caravans on farmland, picking broccoli and vegetables so that we can get, you know, a cheap product on a market store or in a supermarket, on a supermarket shelf. And we've seen huge concentrations there, and people then being forced to live in those same caravans on site for 2 weeks on lockdown to ensure that they don't spread that elsewhere across the community. And again, paid minimum wage, if minimum wage, of course, once you take into account, no doubt, the deductions for the accommodation that being provided with on site and the food bill that they'll get billed for and everything else that got, and the transport to and from the workplace and the rest of it. I mean, it's quite outrageous. Modern day Britain is not this society that so many people believe it to be. There is so much hidden, and it's hidden in plain sight. It's hidden in plain sight, but you don't want to see it. So you got to open your eyes and fight against that. And we see it in meat processing. We've seen all of these meat processing plants go down with real COVID, you know, outbreaks in them, hundreds of workers being isolated off and whole workplaces being closed down. Whether that's in Anglesey, in Wales, in West Yorkshire, in Wrexham, we've seen a whole host of meat processing so that we can get a £3 chicken on a supermarket shelf or something. Again, they don't care. They don't care. They're working in close concentrations. They're exploiting labour from around the world, often on agency contracts, so they don't have the responsibility for employing them. They just simply bring them in through an agency and sack them at will via the agency if they cause any trouble or try and organise, God forbid, a union in order to stand up and do something about this. So we've got a huge number of challenges in front of us. You know, many of the lowest paid workers don't even qualify for statutory sick pay because they don't earn enough to earn the pittance that is £94.25 a week statutory sick pay. If the government want you to do the right thing and self-isolate and shield away if you've got symptoms, you know, nobody's going to be able to do that. You can't survive on £94.25 a week. You've got to be providing people with paid options, full paid options, in order to stay off work and do their civic duty. Otherwise, for the vast majority of people, that's not an option. That's not an option. You've got to continue to work because you've got to feed your kids, you've got to pay your rent or face eviction, and you've got to pay your bills and get to and from work. You've got to live in society and you're already low paid. So we've got to do it. There's been a complete failure of government in terms of intervention at the earliest point that they should have intervened and could have, and therefore saved thousands of lives, actually here in the UK. There's been a complete failure of enforcement, nothing really to do with the Health and Safety Executive. They've had millions cut from them during austerity Britain over the course of the last 10 years. And so has the local authority when it comes to environmental health officers. They've been decimated over 10 years. They haven't got the resources to conduct 3 yearly statutory workplace visits, let alone visits to address the consequences and impact of a pandemic right now. They can't do that. That's why your only real option, you know, if you're out there now and you're not in a union, join a union. Join your appropriate union, whatever the appropriate union is for your workplace, for your industry, for your sector. Join your union. And don't just join it because someone else is going to come and help you out. Join it to get stuck in. Join it to get involved. Join it to participate. Own it. Own it. It's your union. Build your union. Own your union. Fight for your union. And while you're there, get involved in your local people's assembly. Make sure that our local groups are the eyes and ears on the ground of this exploitation, and take out some of these bastards that think they can employ people for less than even the minimum wage, let alone the living wage. Let's call them out and let's get our people out on the streets, doing what we do best as safely as we can do it, with our masks on, with 2 metre distancing, whatever it is, but let's call them out. Let's we know where these places. You can't tell me how people didn't know in Leicester where this exploitation was going on. Of course we knew where this exploitation was going on. Well, let's stop shutting our eyes to it, get off our arses, stand up and do something about it. So join your union, join your People's Assembly group, get involved, get stuck in and stand up and do it. And I'll leave it there, Chair.
Thank you so much, Steve. And I think that you have, in that amount of time, taken us through so many of the things that are wrong and the all-out assault essentially on working people, not over a decade, but over many decades. And it was a very, very clever idea of Margaret Thatcher's, wasn't it, to take on organised labour. And the consequences of it are being borne out still today. I said at Durham Miners Gala that the wounds of that agenda are still bearing scars each day, and they are, because if we think about even the social spaces where working people would organise, where they would chat with each other about the conditions that they are enduring in the workplace, they've shrunk. They've become very, very private. We're kind of atomized and isolated as workers. And that is all part and parcel of the way in which employers are able to exploit. But not only that, the shutting out of unions. And as both Melissa and you, Steve, have very, very eloquently set out, the endemic exploitation, essentially. So much so that where do you start first? Which sector? And I suppose the only answer is every sector has to be getting organised. Every sector needs to be recruiting. Of course, there are the most precarious sectors that are emerging, that are completely unorganised in some places, but that has to be our task. Let me read out some of the comments from people who have been watching so far. So much love for the things that you said, Melissa. I just didn't read them out before Steve spoke, that talked about how, how is it fair that a McDonald's CEO is paid £5,000 per hour, yet you sat at one point in the dark and hungry. What a sick system. Time for change. Melissa, you are so dignified. That was brilliant. Do not for one moment allow this shitty system to make you feel otherwise. I'm sure you won't. I'm sure never. Get in this world. Get in. This world is a better place with you in it. That's what they were saying. And yeah, Bill is talking about, and I think this is such an important point, and Steve really touched on it at the end of his contribution, that every local People's Assembly and Trades Council, and actually in the Durham's People's Assembly we've started to do some of this work, needs to be active on identifying local super exploitative employers. So doing that mapping where we are thinking, okay, we've got a brother or sister or a friend, or not even a friend that we've not met yet in that exploitative workplace. Let's try and make a connection. Let's try and understand what's going on in there if the trade union movement isn't in there already. And let's organize solidarity for those workers so that those people inside the workplaces who are not in a position to do anything about it right now because there is such an oppressive atmosphere and such an oppressive employer knows that there is solidarity and strength outside that will stand up for them if they ever take action and organize around those exploitations. So many people kind of fired up by everything that they've heard so far. I'm going to come to you, Claudia. Now, I know you are a new-ish MP still, but you have certainly faced some very, very serious circumstances that you have to represent your constituents on. And Steve referenced the textiles industry there. I was reading about a factory, and I'm not sure if it's in your constituency, apologies, but certainly in Leicester, where jobs are advertised as being very good if they're paid £6 per hour rather than even the minimum rate of pay. And there is no contract of employment, there's no sick pay, there is nothing written down. Essentially, you have to go in there and you have to endure whatever that employer wants you to endure, including the pay. And then obviously those kind of conditions, alongside some of the other conditions that have been mentioned in relation to a global pandemic, it just has to be a recipe for disaster. And I mean, I don't know if you're going to talk about that tonight. I'm sure you will talk about some of that, but we are just so grateful that you have come and taken some time out of your extremely busy calendar. Over to you, Claudia. If you just take yourself off mute.
Just unmute myself. But thank you for that. I mean, thank you really to the People's Assembly Against Austerity for really inviting me here today to speak at your latest event in your Understanding the Crisis series on danger in the workplace, and your work really in building a national campaign against the Tories and their disastrous handling of this crisis is invaluable to our movement. And it's great to be on a platform, of course, with you, Laura, a great spokesperson for the movement against the Tories, and our very own Steve Turner from Unite, and a great fighting trade union. And of course, to Melissa, powerful Melissa Evans from the Bakers, Food and Allied Workers Union, and your inspirational campaign against McDonald's and fast food workers, really powerful and important. So with the coronavirus crisis exposing the dangers and often illegal working conditions of some of the most exploited workers in Britain, including, as has been widely highlighted, in my own constituency of Leicester East, this is a really important discussion and also a really important issue to be taking campaigning forward on in the period ahead. The return to work while the rate of COVID-19 is still ripe and in many areas going up is another example of how this government has put the interests of big business in making profits ahead of those people and our health throughout this crisis. This mishandling of this crisis, from being too late to going into lockdown, to the continued failures on the personal protective equipment that is so necessary, to the disgusting neglect and under-resourcing of the care sector and much more besides, is what has now led to places such as Leicester, in my own home city, needing to have their own local lockdowns. And to talk just specifically about Leicester and the garment industry, of course, as a member of Parliament, I first spoke up about this issue earlier in the year at the first opportunity that I could get to raise the horrendous reality in Leicester's garment industry today, that many workers, overwhelmingly women, earn well below the minimum wage, working in unthinkable conditions and often illegal conditions. And I want to put it on the record, I will not be intimidated by anyone, and I will speak up at every moment and every turn. So I don't care if you are, whatever your background as a business, you're acting unscrupulously, and these are our workers, and I will not allow anyone to let this go. So many of the workers who have approached me for help are working long hours without recognition, have no contract, as you've indicated, Laura, are ineligible to statutory sick pay, and are employed by firms which have no union recognition and where health and safety measures have not been implemented. It's a disgrace. And to just give some facts, Leicester has the largest numbers of workers, garment workers in the UK. There are an estimated 1,500 garment manufacturing businesses alone in the city, employing in excess of 10,000 people, the majority of whom are from African, Asian and minority ethnic communities. And we saw with the study by Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs that found over a 6-year period, a quarter of all UK textile factories caught failing to pay the minimum wage were actually based in Leicester, with some textile factories reportedly offering less than, obviously, £3.50 an hour, a disgrace. And additionally, a recent report published by the solid organisation Labour behind the label, entitled Boohoo and COVID-19, the people behind the profits, found emerging evidence indicating that conditions in Leicester's factories, primarily producing for Boohoo, the fashion brand Boohoo, for for the purposes of fast fashion are putting workers at risk of COVID-19 infections and fatalities. And it's appalling. It's appalling that the exploited labour of the workers of Leicester are helping to finance extravagant corporate salaries at Boohoo and other corporate giants, including a billionaire, believe it or not, with bonuses worth more than 150 million as part of a 3-year incentive scheme. Imagine that. And then it's important, I think, to understand what is sustaining this disaster capitalism where our communities are collateral damage. It's unacceptable. And it's also important to recognise and fully counter that Boris Johnson and the Tories have sought to blame the exploitation of workers in Leicester's garment industry on Leicester's Labour City. Yet the truth is, it's been an open secret for far too long and has been brought to official attention over many years. And the reality is that the Tory government have known about the issue for years and rejected every single recommendation of a 2019 Environmental Audit Committee report into this issue and slashed the funding, as Steve has indicated, of bodies like the Health and Safety Executive that could have actually done something about this. The government has long been aware of instances of exploitation and issues, yet failed to act. And after this crisis, Leicester can no longer be known as the sweatshop of Europe. This must change. And of course, these problems are not just restricted to Leicester or to the or even to the UK. In this sense, Leicester's garment industry and the crisis it presents is just a microcosm of the global assault on workers' rights. We have seen in over 40 years of right-wing neoliberalism around the globe. The situation in Leicester demonstrates actually the stark inequality that exists in our society, and it's actually proof that the obscene wealth of billionaires is built on the exploitation of the working class. And under these Tories and their ideologically driven austerity, 0-hour contracts, poor pay and unscrupulous employers, these have flourished, and it's a disgrace, and we have to continue to call it out for what it is. What we actually need, however, is a government that prioritizes public health over private profit, including by taking workers' rights absolutely seriously. We then, of course, need to be clear as a movement whose side we are on. That our position, we have to be on the side of working class people, and of course that is the majority. We need to spell out the truth that billionaires exist. They exist because the working class, including migrants, are exploited to make profits for big business. That is the truth. And this brings me actually to my final point. We mustn't let our enemies, dividers, our diversity and our unity is our strength. And together, we therefore must wholeheartedly reject and stand against those seeking to blame our different and varied communities rather than the government's mishandling of this crisis. And that is the truth of it. When we stand together in unity, there is nothing we cannot accomplish. And I believe a better world is possible. So let's build it together. Solidarity, my friends, solidarity.
Oh, Claudia, honestly, I could listen to you all day. Like, that was an exceptional analysis of not only the very serious and stark conditions that workers are experiencing in your constituency, but essentially detailing the failure of neoliberal politics and neoliberal capitalism. And this is an important point for anybody that kind of, and from the beginning there have been some who want us to depoliticize the coronavirus. In fact, lots of right-wing people that I've ever come across want to depoliticize everything because it benefits those who already have the power. It is those who are trying to fight back against that power who are trying to politicize. And there is no starker illustration of the failure of this system than those garment workers in your constituency, Claudia, who at the hands of those exploitative employers who through fancy apps and clever advertising and clever marketing make their products seem so desirable, certainly to younger generations, certainly to those who might have a bit of pocket money to spend on a jumper or some jeans or whatever. And actually, that is exploited hands that made those garments. It's exploited people with little rights who can't feed their own children on the wages that they are paid. And it is our job, and you certainly made it very, very accessible there, Claudia. It's our job to connect those two struggles, isn't it? Those people who, it's working class people who buy Boohoo clothes. It is working class people who go to Primark. It's working class people who are consumers of lots of these products that are made through exploitation. And we have to connect those struggles and make sure that it isn't about blame or judgment, but about saying, okay, it is about the lack of power in the workplace, and that seeping away. And Margaret Thatcher's vision alongside Ronald Reagan in the United States of America was to create this legislative environment where the employers had confidence to exploit, that they weren't worried, because as Steve quite rightly said, the health and safety executive is stripped away to the bone, so inspections are highly unlikely. Well, it's the trade union movement and our movement that will bear witness to that exploitation, but not only that, because that is certainly not good enough, but organise against it. And I have to say this just on a very personal note, Claudia, I feel just very, very grateful that you are there in the House of Commons representing your constituents with socialist values like that. So thank you so much, because it isn't easy when you have the scrutiny of many parts of the media and you have the opposition or those in government literally screaming and shouting when you talk in that chamber. It's not always easy, so thank you. Let me just read some comments and then come back to the panel now for some questions, if that's okay. Jamie said, companies are taking the opportunity to attack terms and conditions and are supported by the government with their lack of strong language, telling companies to furlough companies. The furlough scheme was not created for abuse, and any company seen to be exploiting and taking opportunities to attack terms and conditions or redundancies shall be dealt with strongly. I mean, this is a really important point, isn't it? So we know that there are lots of employers who have taken furlough money because demand dropped, and quite rightly they needed to or wanted to keep those workers employed, but then started redundancy proceedings whilst taking the state's money to keep those employers. So I suppose, I mean, is there pushes legislatively to say to the government there should be no redundancies whilst you take in furlough money? I don't know, Claudia, if you've seen any demands like that, or if there's appetite like that, or Steve, if you want to come in, and Melissa too.
I mean, let me just say that we've seen this time and time again. The most public outing of this, of course, is the BA itself, in terms of, taking furlong and then, issuing redundancy notice and changing the terms and conditions of its remaining staff. And so this is obviously outrageous, but also taking it back to a local level. We're talking about garment manufacturers who are actually also making use of the furlough money and still making people come to work. How are they doing this? They are closing the front gate. Can you believe it? Padlock on the front gate. Anybody that comes to inspect, it looks closed and locked. Meanwhile, residents are telling me they are being made to go through the side gate, a back entrance, and still going to work. And therefore the unscrupulous employer is not only exploiting these workers, taking for government furlough money and pretending that they're factory is closed from prying eyes. It is outrageous and it's scandalous,
and we don't see any great headlines, you know, like we did for almost a decade with social security claimants, that they were scroungers, that they were defrauding the system. People went to jail for benefits fraud. We don't see any great headlines from parts of the right-wing media about that kind of exploitation of the system, of the social security system. I mean, it is unbelievable the things that these employers get away with. I don't know if you want to come in at that point, Steve.
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree with you more. Corporate welfare has been a plague on our society for years, subsidising employers to pay people a pittance. That's what happens with the credit system. That's what used to happen, you know, in a variety of different welfare benefit payments mechanisms. So that this is not new, but it's a struggle that's ongoing, and it will always be there until we transform our politics and our economy so that it looks after the interests of ordinary working class people and our families and communities, rather than the interests of the very rich and wealthy, of course, that Claudia just spoke about. The BA example is a prime example of gross exploitation of a system, abusing not just state money, taxpayers' money. This is our money. The state doesn't have any money. It's our money that they're using in order to fund redundancy notice periods. It's quite disgraceful. And it's not just them, of course. You're seeing that level of exploitation wherever an employer feels that they can get away with it. In most cases where we're organised, of course, we fight back against that. And we do that industrially. We do that with political argument. And we do it with a legal argument where there is one. There isn't a legal argument here, of course, in the UK around the use of furlough when you're on notice of redundancy. But there would be if you were in Germany or in France or in Spain, because their short-time working protections make it illegal to put people under notice of redundancy or dismissal during the time you're in receipt of state support. They are absolutely crystal clear about that. You need to take people back onto the payroll and give them their full notice on full pay if you want to shed labour during the course of a crisis. And we should learn from that. We have learned from that, of course, and we keep putting pressure on the government to do it. But of course, this is not our government. We'd much rather be negotiating with John McDonnell as Chancellor and Jeremy Corbyn as leader, of course. That's not happening. We didn't win the last election. We are where we are. We've got to deal with this lot in the best way that we can. So however we can maximise pressure on them, of course we will. Are they likely to do that? Very unlikely. It's only the collective power of our class, ordinary working people, standing together and fighting industrially and with our communities, with public support on our side as well. It's not just a workplace struggle in those textile mills in Leicester. This is a community struggle. We've got families, we live in communities. We should be rising up against this level of exploitation wherever we find it.
I was just going to come to Melissa and she disappeared. Let's hope she is back as soon as possible. I wanted to mention this. It's slightly off the workers' rights agenda, and we'll come back to that for one last question. But this doesn't surprise me. Michael has commented, why are the government not being held accountable for blatant wrongs in handing out government contracts to their friends of friends of friends? It seems as though there's been like a real shoring up of the private sector over this period, but we haven't really got access to that information. I don't know if you feel like this, but I just feel almost sometimes completely overwhelmed with the scale of the attacks, wrongdoings, mishandling of the government. Hi, welcome back, Melissa.
Sorry about that.
And you know, I'm sure this is mentioned in Parliament, Claudia, but how do we hold them to account for something like that? You know, is there a fair and proper process for those contracts? You know, millions and millions of pounds of taxpayers' money.
I know. I mean, the worst, obviously, some of the worst case scenarios is obviously where they've used the coronavirus pandemic to actually part privatize the healthcare around the testing, tracking, and tracing, and every single one of those companies are private companies in some way or the other. I'm pretty sure linked to government ministers. They're getting huge contracts, and these are the same private test, track, trace companies that then are deployed to places like Leicester to undertake the testing. And then in the contract, there's not even within the contract anything that says you must give the data to the local public authorities so that they can actually do something with it. It's unbelievable that it's not even it's not even written in the contract, and that it was missing from such a a multi-million pound contract. And then we've not even got an efficient testing track app system. We've seen all of the difficulties around that. So, I think it's entirely scandalous and incredible that the government's been able to get away with this. But we have to keep calling it out in Parliament, as we do, whether through our, oral questioning, written questioning, whether through debates. We just keep calling it out because it is one step towards the Trump privatization of the NHS, and that's what we've got to keep our eye closely on.
Melissa, we lost you there briefly before you had an opportunity to think about the previous question. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add from what's been said so far.
I did. I thought the point on the benefits and the way that we've all been looked at as scroungers. I'm on benefits, I'm on full benefits, but I can work up to 40 hours a week. I'm not a scrounger. I pay into the tax system that pays me back in benefits. The government pays my rent while McDonald's pays me poverty pay. And them two things combined together keeps me in poverty. And there is literally, I've tried my hardest to get out of it, but there's no way out. How can I get out of a system that is not set up for me to get anywhere other than stay in debt? Because that's the only way I can get out of it, is to put myself into debt. Even
absolutely right.
Isn't free. Education isn't free. I couldn't leave school and go straight into education. I had to pay for it. I didn't have the money to pay for it because I come from poverty.
And it absolutely is. And this is why a kind of conservative ideology and this myth of a meritocracy, that if only you try really hard, poor people, and work all the hours God sends, and try really hard, you'll get yourself out of it.
It doesn't matter how hard you work for McDonald's. I've broken bones in that place, broken bones, and they didn't even say I'm sorry. They didn't even give me. They didn't even want to give me the time off. I was back in that place 3 days after I broke my wrist.
Absolutely right, and this is the point. It's as if those people who have that kind of ideology think that if they had the same life, they would do better, or there would be a different way out. Whereas the system is designed so that people are in poverty pay, and that's to extract as much profit. And we know that profit doesn't go back to the work as it goes, and has the trajectory for at least the last decade has been going in greater proportions to the richest people in society. And so we have to do something about that. We have to have a plan as a movement to eradicate in-work poverty. What is the point of work if it doesn't allow you to live a life and a good life, if it actually entrenches that poverty? Let me come to a trade union question, if that's all right. David has said, as a union member, we are disappointed with our lack of influence. We have a workforce of 1,500. Company policy is not taken seriously by management. And if you speak out, you are kind of seen as the troublemaker. What can we do? Anyone want to come in? Melissa's unmuting herself. Go.
I want to come in. What you do is you do it together. If I went to my boss and I went there on my own and I buzzed his buzzer and I said to him, look, I can't live like this anymore. I live in poverty and you need to give me a pay rise and treat me better. He's going to probably laugh at me, set the dogs and send me running through gates, But if I get everyone that I work with and then we all go to his door together and we all say it at the same time with the same voice, in solidarity and meaning, and actually being in solidarity and actually being unified and actually being there for one another, that's how you get that change. You do it together. You knock on his door together. He has no choice but to listen. That message is too loud to ignore. They can't. So that's what I would say. Talk to your colleagues, organize your workplace, and also bring in the community, because it's the community that these businesses are in, and it's the communities that these businesses are exploiting also. They might be exploiting the workers, but they're also exploiting the business, the communities, because when they're not paying their way in taxes, them taxes don't get put back into the country, which means we are struggling more. We have to work more. That's why it is the way it is. And we're all, as a country, working more than we are relaxing, because of the corporations taking and just taking and just taking. We all have to come together, every sector, not just one sector doing this, one sector doing that. Every sector needs to come together and do this at the same time with the same voice.
Thank you. And Steve, there's a question here from somebody called Jean, who said, how can we persuade more to join the Unite community? I'm a member, but I'm extremely vulnerable in lockdown. If you don't, could you take that one?
Yeah, fine, no problem. I would just say to the other one as well, I mean, Melissa handled it very, very, very well. I'd just take it back to our initial contribution. Don't just join your union, own your union. Own your union, build your union, it's yours. Don't think you're going to join a union and somebody's going to come over the hill with the answer. You know, the answers are contained within ourselves. We own the answer, and we equally own the ability to do something about it. And that's our collective ability to unite and stand together and act together. And that's that solidarity that Melissa was talking about. You're very easy on your own to get broken off and sacked and the rest of it. The reality is very difficult to do that when you stand together and you build that campaign, that real confidence amongst the workforce. Unite Community is a fantastic thing. I'm responsible for it. I've been responsible for it since we first set it up. This is a home inside our union for all those not in paid work, which is brilliant. It's like the old unemployed workers unions of the 1930s. It gives people a collective voice where often they're isolated and feeling desperate on their own, you know, particularly in the times of COVID, where people have physically just directly been isolated. The vulnerable have been shielded and haven't been able to see anybody for 12, 14, 15 weeks, 15 weeks now. And they feel digitally excluded as well. If they're often on low pay and haven't got access to services. If you're over 75, you can't even get a free TV license anymore, you know. So you have to get involved. If you want to get involved, we have groups in every one of our regions. We have a coordinator in every one of our regions. If you leave a message on the chat room, I'll come back to you and put you in contact with the person that's responsible in your area. We have community branches that are meeting virtually online where we can. They certainly meet physically, and they get out there and they campaign on the issues that are important to you. They support our industrial pickets, our industrial conflict, our industrial struggles, and they support our community campaigns. Whatever they may be on, they're local, they're really engaging. It's a powerful group, and I'm incredibly proud of them. So leave us a message in the chat, and I'll come back to you on it with the person that can help you in your locality.
Thanks so much, Steve. Can you believe that our hour is 2 minutes from being over? I could listen to you all night, but I wanna ask you this, because one of the things that I see, like amongst my own friends and family, and certainly on social media, is really like a tiredness in the movement, and certainly a belief amongst some that it is almost impossible to win. So the legislation is against working class people. Most elements of the mainstream media, if we're honest, aren't elevating the victories of working class people or the struggles that we're facing within this system. So what do? How do we convince people that there is hope, that we can win when we unite? You've given us quite a lot of the ingredients tonight of getting to the point of victory, but tell us from your kind of own heart, if you like, what you think it takes to win and why there is hope that we can win as a movement. I'm going to come to you first, Melissa, just in the same order, then to you, Steve, and then last words to Claudia.
So the way I see it is like, this is like, it's either gonna stay, we do nothing and stay the same and nothing changes, or we get up and we actually do something. You know, there is more of us than there is of them. Always remember that. That's where our power comes from, our numbers. There are way more of us than there is of them. And there shouldn't be such few people dictating the way that everybody else lives. We all live in this country. Everybody that lives in this country is here, and everybody should be able to contribute. And the government that we have in place do not speak for the majority of people. They speak for themselves.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Steve?
Yeah, here. I'm forever the optimist. My glass is always half full. You know, if you'd have told black people in South Africa they'd live under apartheid forever, then they'd have probably believed you until they stood up and did something about it with the rest of the global movement to end apartheid. If you told women at the turn of the century they'd have ever had the vote, they'd have said that we'll never have the vote, but they stood up and they broke them bad laws. Bad laws sometimes are there to be broken. That's why they put laws in place. It's those people that control society, legislate to maintain that control. And sometimes you've just got to say, well, we've had enough of that and we're going to break that. And the reason we're going to break that is because it's for the social good. If you look at the history of social progress, you're looking at a history of struggle. And that's working class struggle. And it is a struggle. It's not called a struggle because it's a stroll in the park. It's called a struggle because it's hard work. And it's hard work that boosts confidence, inspires people, gives people the confidence to organise, to collectivise, to unite and to fight. And that's how you change society. You don't do it writing letters, you do it getting out on the streets and getting active.
Thank you so much, Steve. And Claudia?
Well, nothing, absolutely nothing comes without struggle. There's so many that have gone before us and we stand on their shoulders, really. And we cannot leave a future, we cannot bequeath a future less than what we ourselves have received. So we have to go forward with a continued vision ahead for change, really, because we cannot accept what we are seeing now. And I really just want to just say one thing, because I was just looking for an inspirational quote to end it. And I just think that that quote comes really from Angela Davis, because you have to connect what's happened with Black Lives Matter and that struggle over many years, a struggle that was there because people refused to accept in America the unfair treatment and murder of Black lives in America, men, women, children, gunned down by uniformed armed officers. And it was there over many years, and we in the Black community have been following it and marching with it and protesting with it for so long. But in the murder, the lynching of George Floyd, we saw the Black Lives Matter movement take a different turn, and it really went global in the sense that it woke up society, and we all were able to see what was happening, what the reality was, and why Black Lives Matter. And really, I just wanted to end on this quote from Angela Davis, who said, "I'm no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept." And that must be our mission.
There's no better words to end this on. Thank you so much, Claudia, for reminding us of her brilliance. I think one of the things that I'd just like to say before we close is week after week, we have really exceptional people on this program. We are a magnificent movement. We are actually really powerful. Every person that we have had on here believes in the potential for changes, not accepting the things that are unacceptable anymore. They are fighting against them. And I think one of the things, or two of the things that is in our favor, one of which Melissa mentioned, we are the many, we are the majority of the world, and number two is that it comes natural to us, doesn't it? Like when to humans, when you see that injustice, there is a reflex reaction in us all, is there not? It sometimes is a flicker of a candle, sometimes it's a burning inferno of feelings where you just can't take that kind of pain, and that energy must go into trying to produce change. And I'll end by saying, Claudia, solidarity with every single worker in Leicester and beyond, in the whole of the United Kingdom, and of course internationally. Please let the People's Assembly know if there is anything we can do for your constituents in that struggle. Please don't forget that on Sunday, the Bakers Union, I'm just going to read it out now, have the hashtag Strike for Black Lives. Please join that rally at 7 on Sunday. The Bakers Union, and I'm sure it'll be in the comments, are connecting those struggles between the United Kingdom and the United States. Please join in solidarity for them. Don't forget, it's Tall Puddle tomorrow night. There's so much going on. You're just going to be on Zoom the whole time, aren't you? And then Saturday, the 25th of July at 1 p.m, we have the future of industry, jobs and rights at work. See the details in the comment bar too. Thank you as ever for joining us on Making Sense of the Crisis Part 19. Thanks to Claudia, to Steve and to Melissa for bringing us that truth which is so often concealed. Solidarity to you all and good evening.
Well done, everyone.